Alright, hello once again, Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College. I've been coming at you with a series of video presentations for the Rankin Technical College AWD Application and Web Development 1111.NET Framework with Web Databases class. The main textbook for the class is ASP.NET MVC with Entity Framework and CSS by Lee Naylor. But before going into that in too much depth and breadth of coverage, I've decided to go through quite a few chapters, 13 of the 17, I believe, of Professional ASP.NET MVC by John Galloway of Microsoft and others. So far, I've gone through the first 9 chapters, as you can see right here. I'm not going to read those to you. I skipped chapters 10, 11, 12, and 13, and I did chapter 14. I'm going to do 15 right now, and then 16, but I'm going to skip 17. And I'm not going to lie to you here, this is a pretty heavy chapter. In fact, so is chapter 16, which is advanced topics. So we'll do the best we can here, but I'm just trying to get some of the, for lack of better words, go over some of the fundamentals with you. So extending MVC, extending models, extending views, extending controllers, kind of what you would think. All right, all the code for this chapter is provided via NuGet, as described in the introduction in the front of this book. Throughout the chapter, NuGet code samples are clearly indicated in applicable sections. You can also visit here, all right, for offline use. And I think if I go there, I think I've done this already, but so let's see, table of contents, download code. I think I'm going to grab 15 and 16 right now. So there's 15, there's 16, which of course I have to do twice. Alright, so let's open a folder, get rid of the other 16. That's great. What did I just do? I hope I didn't remove my downloads folder. Oh my God. Brother. Well, that was interesting. It has no folder to show it in, so technically it's not there. That's lovely, Jeff. Let me fix this. I'll pause for just a minute. Alright, I think I brought it back. So let's continue on. I'm going to grab chapter 15 in here and extract. Alright. One of the lessons underlined in Chapter 1 is about the importance of layers in ASP.NET Framework. Alright. So it's been there since the beginning. Several newer technologies from the ASP.NET team are built on top of the core runtime, including ASP.NET MVC5. Everything that's done by the MVC framework can be done by anybody, whether they're in Microsoft or outside of Microsoft. Some developers won't ever need to know about the underlying extensibility of the platform. Some will. This chapter is for those who want to get a deeper understanding of how the pieces of the MVC fit together. So again, it's about extending each piece. All right, it says it's available in NuGet package right there. So I'm going to follow their steps. Start with a new project, empty with MVC selected. All right, so let me close this. File, new project, MVC. We'll just call this Chapter 15. Empty project, but with MVC selected. All right. We're immediately, once this comes up, which will take a second, not even a second, they want us to come in, let's see, View, Other Windows. Let's go down here to the Packet Manager console, and to it. Okay. Well, I'm embarrassed to say I've forgotten how to do this, so let me pause again. All right, I believe it's install package, but we're going to find that out. That's what I was thinking. So, as mentioned, we're going to find that out right now. Sorry, it's... Yeah, it looks like that worked. Good. All right. So the chapter shows only the important pieces of the sample code, so following along with the full source code from NuGet is critical in understanding how these work. All right, extending models. The model system in MVC has several extensible pieces, including the ability to describe models with metadata, to validate models, and to influence how models are constructed from the request data. We have a sample for each one of these. The process of turning request data, form data, query strings, etc. into models is known as model binding. Model binding, as mentioned right there, happens in two phases, I should say. First, understanding where the data comes from. Second, creating and updating model objects using those values. When your MVC app participates in model binding, the values that are used for the actual model binding process come from value providers. The purpose of a value provider is simply to provide access to information so that it can be used in model binding. The model framework ships with several value providers, which can provide data from the following scenarios: explicit values for child actions, form values, JSON data, route values, query string values, upload values. Value providers come from value provider factories, and the system searches for data from those value providers in their registered order. Developers can write their own value provider factories, which is way, way above what I'm able to do, probably what you're able to do. In addition to the value provider factories in the MVC itself, the team also included several provider factories and value providers in the ASP.NET MVC futures. And you can see what these include: cookie value provider, server variable value provider, session value provider, temp data value provider. Microsoft has open sourced all of MVC at http://aspnetwebstack.codeplex.com, which should provide a good reference for you to start building your own values and factories. So after finishing this class, if you want to do that, that would be your call, of course. The other part of extending models is model binders, which take the values from a value provider system and either create new models with the data or fill in existing models with the data. The default model binder in MVC is an extremely powerful piece of code capable of performing model binding against traditional classes, collection classes, lists, arrays, and even dictionaries. One thing the default model binder cannot do well is to support immutable objects. An immutable object is something that is set and cannot be changed. All right. An often overlooked responsibility of model binders is the validation or validating the values that they're binding. All right. So this example that they, I didn't even run over it right here, does not go over any validation. There's an extended example which goes over validation. And, I don't think I'm saying anything you don't already know other than, but I'll say it anyway. And that is, don't ever underestimate, ever, the importance of validation. All right? People who are going to end up using your code are going to expect that it works and it does what it claims to do, etc. All right. We're doing two new things in this model of bind, this version of bind model that you did not see in the original. Number one, the block of code with the first if, which is trying to find values with a name prefix before falling back to an empty prefix. Number two, an empty instance of the point object is placed in the model metadata. Again, lots of code here. I'm not going over any of it. Why? Because I'm not the one to do this. All right? They do try to explain this line by line. All right, so let's at least go over a little of it. So I'm going to leave the code up here. And in the meantime, on pages 434, 435, and on the top of 436, they explain this code. Now, a lot of this, I realize, is just me reading it, and when I can, I'll try to, add some stuff. All right. So the first thing you need to do is retrieve the attempted value from the value provider, and then record the value in the model state so that the users can always see the exact value they typed. The fully qualified name prepends the model name in the event that you're doing deep model binding, which might happen if you decide you have a property of type point inside of another class, such as a view model. After you have the result from the model provider, you must get a copy of the model metadata that describes the property and then determine what the attempted value was that the user entered. This will determine whether or not you should convert empty strings into nulls. It's generally on by default because HTML forms always post empty strings rather than nulls when the user hasn't entered any values. The next section of code attempts to convert the value into the destination type and records if there's some kind of a conversion error. You record whether a conversion failure occurred for later because you want to add conversion failure error messages only if no other validation failed. You run all the validators. And you record each validation failure in the errors collection model state. You record the data type conversion error if any occurred and no other validation rules failed, then return the value back so it can be used for the rest of the model binding process. This sample that's here includes a simple controller and a view that demonstrates the use of the model binder. I struggle as to whether or not to even go over this code and these last two chapters, but I thought in the end, you know what? If one person watches it and gets something out of it, great. And if not, all right, then I've lost a half an hour to an hour of my life, but whatever. All right, describing models with metadata. The model metadata system, as said, was introduced in ASP.NET MVC2. It helps describe meta information about a model used to assist in the HTML generation and validation of models. The kinds of information is shown here: type of model, type of containing model, name of the property the value came from, whether it's simple or complex, the display name, does it have to be formatted, is it required, is it read-only, and what template should be used with it. Now, what we've basically dealt with throughout this text has been the system.componentModel.data_annotation namespace, which is, when you think of it, is pretty limited. We can do things like say whether or not a field is required, give a range for a field, use regular expressions on a field, etc. But not really all that much more out of the box than that. All right. I'm going to jump up all the way to 438, validating models on the bottom of the page and going on to the next page. Model validation has been supported since ASP.NET MVC 1.0. All right, and in 2.0, they introduced pluggable validation providers. Again, as mentioned, Chapter 6 covered writing custom validators in depth, so we've talked about that a little bit before. Out of the box, it says 3 validator providers are provided or installed by default: data annotation model validator provider, data error info model validator provider, and client data type model data provider. Implementing a validator means deriving from the model validator base class and implementing the single method that returns validators for a given model. All right, they do give an example here on the bottom of page 439 and going on to page 440, 441. All right, let's jump up to the top of page 442. That was it for extending models, so the next thing is extending views. Again, sorry, I'm just basically doing a rehash of what's in the book. And no, I'm not sorry. I just decided that I'm going to do this. So I'm done with part 1. I'm going to come back to talk about extending views in just a couple minutes.